The Odyssey, the Solar Confederacy's deep space exploration vessel, had become more legend than history in the 70 years since its disappearance. Its name was whispered as a cautionary tale in the halls of the Space Academy and muttered as a curse by veteran pilots when navigating near the edges of the Whispering Void. The mysterious region of space had claimed dozens of ships over the centuries, but none as advanced or as celebrated as the Odyssey. So when the long-range sensors at Jupiter Monitoring Station Delta picked up the unmistakable silhouette of the ship emerging from the darkness, disbelief was the first reaction. "Run those scans again," ordered Station Commander Vega. "That can't possibly be the Odyssey." The technician's fingers trembled slightly as she complied. "Sir, identification markers match. Hull configuration matches. It's her." The news raced through the Solar Confederacy faster than light itself, transmitted through quantum relays to Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies. The legendary ghost ship had returned, apparently intact, but broadcasting no communications and responding to no hails. And, as observation satellites captured higher-resolution imagery, it became clear that the Odyssey was not precisely as it had been when it disappeared. Strange, subtle patterns shifted across its hull, like ripples on dark water. Energy signatures pulsed in configurations that defied conventional analysis. "I want the best team we have on this," Admiral Chinli Wei told his assembled staff at Confederacy headquarters on Earth. "Someone who understands the incomprehensible," which is how Dr. Eris Thorne found himself staring at an official communiqué from the very organization that had once branded him a scientific pariah. The irony wasn't lost on him as he packed his sparse belongings in his small apartment on Europa. The institutions that had mocked his theories on nonlinear communication protocols were now desperately hoping those same theories might explain the impossible return of the Odyssey. Thorne had pursued his research despite the ridicule, driven by something more personal than academic curiosity. His mentor, Dr. Eleanor Way, had been the chief linguist aboard the Odyssey. Her disappearance had left a wound that 7 decades of theoretical work had failed to heal. "They need you now," he murmured to Way's photograph before carefully placing it in his travel case. "So I suppose they need me too." The military vessel assigned to investigate the Odyssey was called the Stiletto, a name that suggested precision, sharpness, and a certain lethal elegance. Its commander, Eva Rostova, possessed all of those qualities. "Dr. Thorne," she said, offering a firm handshake as he boarded her ship. Her silver-shot black hair was pulled back in a tight regulation bun, and her eyes assessed him with professional detachment. "I've read your file. Impressive theoretical work. Controversial, but impressive. Commander Rostova." Thorne nodded, taking in the pristine command deck and the disciplined crew. "I've read yours as well. 3 first-contact scenarios, all resolved without hostilities. That's even more impressive. Let's hope we can make this the 4th, she replied, though the tight line of her mouth suggested she was preparing for less favorable outcomes. "We'll reach the Odyssey in 26 hours. I suggest you use that time to brief my senior staff on what to expect." Thorne smiled thinly. "If I knew what to expect, Commander, I wouldn't be quite so intrigued." The briefing that followed was tense. Thorne's theories about multidimensional data transmission and nonlinear communication protocols were met with skepticism from Rostova's tactical officers, particularly when he suggested that the Odyssey might have encountered entities that communicated through geometric patterns or pure mathematics rather than anything resembling language. "So you're saying the ship might have been talking to something out there?" Lieutenant Karlov, the security chief, asked with undisguised disbelief. "I'm saying," Thorne replied carefully, "that communication is fundamentally about pattern recognition, and that patterns exist beyond our conventional understanding of space, time, or even reality. The Whispering Void has always exhibited properties that suggest a thinning of dimensional boundaries." "Spare us the theoretical physics," Dr. Rostova cut in. "What do we do when we reach the Odyssey?" Thorne looked at her directly. "We listen before we speak, Commander, and we recognize that we may be entering a conversation that's been going on for 70 years. As the Stiletto approached the Odyssey, the strangeness of the returned vessel became increasingly apparent. Close-range scans revealed that while the basic structure remained intact, subtle alterations permeated every aspect of the ship. The hull material, while still recognizably the titanium ceramic composite, used in Confederacy vessels, now exhibited crystalline properties at the molecular level. The patterns visible on its surface weren't painted or projected. They seemed to be expressions of the material itself, as if the metal were dreaming. "It's beautiful," whispered Ensign Reyes, the youngest officer on the bridge. "It's wrong," countered Lieutenant Karloff. "No ship changes like that naturally." Rostova studied the readouts with a practiced eye. "Dr. Thorne, your assessment?" Thorne's face was illuminated by the shifting patterns displayed on the main view screen. "It's been rebuilt, or perhaps a better word would be repurposed." "Repurposed by what?" Rostova asked. "That," said Thorne, "is the 60 trillion credit question." The docking procedure was executed with precision, despite the unsettling way the Odyssey's airlock seemed to anticipate their approach, subtly reconfiguring to match the Stiletto's docking mechanism perfectly. Rostova led the first boarding party herself, along with Lieutenant Karlov, Dr. Thorne, and 4 security personnel in full tactical gear. The interior of the Odyssey defied all expectations. The standard corridors of a Confederacy exploration vessel were recognizable in their basic layout, but everything else had changed. The walls seemed to pulse almost imperceptibly, as if breathing. The lighting came not from fixtures, but from a soft, ambient glow that seemed to emanate from the material of the ship itself. And everywhere, etched into surfaces or floating just beneath them, were symbols, complex geometric patterns that shifted slowly, like algae in a gentle current. "Structural integrity is sound," reported one of the security team, consulting her scanner. "Atmosphere is breathable. No detectable pathogens or harmful radiation." "Life signs?" Rostova asked. The security officer frowned at her device. "Inconclusive, Commander. There's interference." Thorne was already moving ahead, his fingers tracing the symbols on the wall without quite touching them. "These aren't random," he said, his voice hushed with excitement. "There's syntax here, grammar. It's a language, or perhaps more accurately, a meta-language." "Stay with the group, Dr. Rostova ordered sharply. Thorne nodded, but his eyes remained on the flowing symbols. "We need to find a bridge," he said, "or whatever serves as the command center now." They found it 15 minutes later, though the journey should have taken 5 according to the ship's original schematics. Corridors seemed to extend or contract subtly as they walked, and twice Karlov insisted they had turned in circles despite maintaining a straight path. The bridge of the Odyssey was both familiar and utterly alien. The basic layout remained: captain's chair, navigation console, communication stations, but everything had been transformed. The consoles had become crystalline growths that pulsed with inner light. The view screens were now transparent surfaces that seemed to look out onto impossible geometries rather than the starfield outside. And the crew, the legendary lost crew of the Odyssey, they were still there. "My God," whispered Rostova. The officers and specialists who had disappeared with the ship 70 years ago had not died. They had not been preserved in stasis. Instead, they had been integrated. Their bodies were partially merged with the crystalline structures of the ship, translucent growths extending from the consoles into their limbs, necks, and skulls. Their eyes were open but pupilless, glowing with the same soft light that permeated the ship. Their expressions were peaceful, almost meditative. "Eleanor," Thorne breathed, approaching the figure that had once been Dr. Eleanor Way. Her body was seated at what had been the linguistic station, now a twisted sculpture of crystal and light. Tendrils of the material extended into her temples, and her hands rested on a surface etched with the shifting symbols. "Doctor, don't touch her," Karlov shouted, but Thorne had already reached out, his fingertips hovering just above Way's transformed hand. A low, complex humming filled the bridge, rising in pitch and complexity until it felt like it might shatter their skulls. The symbols throughout the room began to pulse in synchronization with the sound. "It's responding to our presence," Thorne said, his voice tight with controlled excitement. This isn't death or assimilation, it's transformation. The ship isn't just a ship anymore. It's a system, and they're part of it. Fall back, Rostova ordered, her hand moving to her sidearm. We're leaving this area now. Thorne looked at her with something between frustration and pleading. Commander, this is the greatest discovery in human history. We can't just. We can and we will. Rostova cut him off. We'll establish a secure perimeter on the engineering deck and conduct our investigation methodically. Whatever happened here, we're not rushing into it. As they retreated from the bridge, the humming followed them, modulating in ways that seemed almost conversational. And in the crystalline walls, the symbols flowed faster, as if excited by their presence. Over the next 48 hours, the investigation proceeded along two parallel tracks. Rostova's team attempted to secure the ship and gather data according to standard first contact protocols, while Thorne immersed himself in studying the symbols and sounds that permeated the transformed vessel. The military approach yielded troubling results. Scanner technology proved almost useless inside the Odyssey, with readings that defied the laws of physics. Negative mass in some sections, temporal fluctuations in others, and energy signatures that appeared to exist in more than 3 dimensions. Attempts to access the ship's logs produced either corrupted data or strange geometric patterns that gave several technicians severe headaches and, in one case, triggered seizure. This isn't working, Rostova admitted in a private conference with her senior staff. Our technology can't interface with whatever this is. We should consider the nuclear option, Lieutenant Karlov suggested grimly. If we can't understand it, we can't control it. And if we can't control it, it's a threat. Rostova's mouth tightened. That's premature. Dr. Thorne is making progress. Indeed, Thorne had established a rudimentary interface by using resonant sound patterns to interact with the humming that filled the ship. By playing specific tones and observing how the ship's ambient sounds changed in response, he began to detect patterns. Not a conversation exactly, but a form of information exchange. It's not giving me data in any conventional sense, he explained to Rostova. It's more like sensory impressions. Glimpses through a window I can barely comprehend. What are you seeing through this window, Doctor? Rostova asked, her skepticism evident but held in check. Thorne's eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, but they burned with excitement. Space that doesn't follow Euclidean geometry. Entities composed of pure pattern rather than matter or energy. Technology that doesn't manipulate reality so much as negotiate with it. That sounds more like mysticism than science, Karlov scoffed. All sufficiently advanced technology appears as magic to those who don't understand it, Thorne countered. The Odyssey encountered something out there in the void, something that transformed it, repurposed it. I believe it was running from something, hiding something. The ship isn't just changed, it's carrying knowledge, technology, ideas that could revolutionize our understanding of reality itself. Their debate was interrupted by an urgent communication from the security team. There had been an incident in the crew quarters section of the Odyssey. Ensign Perez, against orders, had touched one of the integrated crew members, specifically the crystalline growth emerging from a navigator's chest. The ensign was now in a state of extreme distress, alternating between catatonia and frenzied episodes where he drew the same interlocking geometric patterns over and over while muttering about impossible angles and the pattern underneath. Rostova ordered an immediate quarantine and had Perez transported back to the Stiletto's medical bay. The incident hardened the positions of both the military contingent, who saw it as evidence of hostile intent, and Thorne, who viewed it as confirmation of his theories about multidimensional communication. His brain wasn't equipped to process what he experienced, Thorne argued. It would be like trying to teach calculus to an infant. The cognitive framework simply isn't there. And yet you want to continue this conversation, Rostova said. What makes you different from Ensign Perez? Thorne's expression was solemn. I've been preparing for this my entire career, Commander. My theories about nonlinear communication aren't just abstract concepts. They're mental frameworks, tools for comprehending the incomprehensible. Before Rostova could respond, her communication officer interrupted with urgent news. Confederacy Command had received their preliminary reports and was deeply concerned. A special directive had been issued. If the situation escalated further, or if there was any indication that the transformed Odyssey posed a threat to the solar system, Rostova was authorized to deploy tactical nuclear charges to destroy it. "They're panicking," Thorne said when Rostova informed him of the directive, reacting out of fear rather than understanding. "They're being cautious," Rostova countered, though her tone lacked conviction. "And frankly, Doctor, I'm not sure they're wrong. Whatever happened to this ship and its crew, it wasn't natural. It wasn't human." "That's precisely the point," Thorne insisted. "We're encountering something genuinely new, genuinely alien, for the first time in our history. This could be the most important moment in human development since we left Earth." Their argument was cut short when Thorne's makeshift interface began to emit a complex series of tones. The symbols on the walls around them accelerated their shifting patterns, flowing toward a specific corridor. "It's trying to show us something," Thorne said, already moving to follow the flow of symbols. "Doctor, wait," Rostova called, but Thorne was already halfway down the corridor. She swore under her breath and followed, signaling Lieutenant Karlov to bring a security team. The flowing symbols led them deeper into the ship, to areas that didn't appear on any schematic of the original Odyssey. The corridors narrowed and widened in ways that seemed to defy spatial geometry, and several times Rostova had the distinct sensation that they were walking on the ceiling rather than the floor, despite gravity remaining constant. Finally, they reached what appeared to be a central chamber, a perfect sphere embedded within the heart of the ship. Inside, suspended in the center without any visible means of support, was a complex polyhedron composed of the same crystalline material that had transformed the rest of the ship. It pulsed with light and energy, each facet displaying different flowing patterns of symbols. "This is it," Thorne whispered, his voice filled with awe. "The heart of the transformation. The artifact." The polyhedron rotated slowly in the air, each facet seeming to observe them as they entered the chamber. The humming that permeated the ship was stronger here, more complex, modulating in patterns that seemed almost musical. "What is it?" Rostova asked, her hand instinctively moving to her sidearm. "I believe it's a repository," Thorne said. "A library, a database, consciousness, perhaps. Not the original alien intelligence that transformed the ship, but a record of it. And more importantly, a record of what it was fleeing from." Before Rostova could question him further, an urgent communication came through from the stiletto. Long-range sensors had detected multiple anomalies throughout the solar system. Quantum fluctuations, gravitational distortions, temporal irregularities. Monitoring stations near Jupiter were reporting equipment failures and bizarre readings. Several had gone completely offline after reporting psychotropic static affecting their crews. "It's defensive," Thorne said, his eyes widening with realization. The Confederacy's attempts to remotely access the Odyssey triggered some kind of protection mechanism, a psychic electromagnetic pulse. "You're saying the ship attacked our monitoring stations?" Karlov demanded. "Not attack, defend," Thorne insisted. "It's reacting to perceived threats, like an immune response." Rostova's face hardened. "Intentional or not, this confirms that the Odyssey poses a clear danger to Confederate installations. We need to implement containment protocols immediately. You can't just destroy it," Thorne protested. "Not now. Not when we're so close to understanding." As if in response to his words, the polyhedron's humming intensified, and the patterns on its facets began to flow toward Thorne. He felt a strange pulling sensation, as if the artifact were reaching out to him specifically. Without conscious thought, he stepped forward, his hand outstretched toward the polyhedron. Rostova shouted something. Karlov moved to intercept him, but it was too late. Thorne's fingers made contact with the crystalline surface. The universe exploded behind his eyes. Information flooded his consciousness, not as data or images or words, but as pure concept, pure understanding. He saw the Odyssey's journey into the whispering void, its encounter with vast intelligences that existed in dimensions beyond human comprehension. He saw beings made of folded reality, entities that manipulated the fabric of existence as easily as humans shaped clay. The Weavers, that was the closest his mind could come to naming them. Entities that wove reality itself, creating patterns of existence that cascaded through dimensions. They had found the Odyssey drifting at the edge of their domain, studied it, and then, in desperate haste, transformed it, because they were being hunted. The Unravelers, beings of unpattern, entities that sought to reduce all complexity to void. Where the Weavers created, the Unravelers unmade. An ancient conflict spanning realities beyond human comprehension. The Odyssey had been repurposed as a lifeboat, a seed bank of Weaver knowledge and technology. The crew, integrated into the ship, were not victims, but participants in a desperate gamble. Their consciousness preserved as part of the pattern, helping to maintain the integrity of the artifact at the ship's heart. The Loom, Thorne's mind named it, a device capable of weaving local reality, of creating patterns strong enough to resist the Unraveler's dissolution. And now, through his touch, the Loom was communicating directly with him, imparting understanding beyond language. The psychic pulse that had disrupted Confederate monitoring stations hadn't been merely defensive. It had been a beacon, a cry for help. But it had also been a signal fire visible across dimensions. The Unravelers had noticed, and they were coming. Thorne came back to himself, gasping, collapsing to his knees before the polyhedron. Rostova was at his side instantly, her military training warring with genuine concern. "What happened? What did you see?" she demanded, helping him to his feet. "We need to prepare," Thorne gasped, his mind still reeling from the influx of alien knowledge. "They're coming. The Unravelers." The ship wasn't just transformed, it was weaponized. It's a fortress of reality, designed to resist entropy itself. Before Rostova could question him further, the Stiletto's sensors detected something approaching Jupiter's orbit at impossible speed. It registered not as a physical object, but as a distortion in space, a void moving with purpose, consuming light and matter in its path. Small asteroids in the outer belt simply ceased to exist as it passed, not destroyed, but reduced to complete non-existence. "The Unraveler," Thorne whispered, watching the sensor readings with horrified fascination. It followed the signal. Confederacy Command, monitoring the situation remotely, immediately ordered Rostova to destroy the Odyssey and withdraw. The approaching anomaly was classified as an extinction-level threat, and they theorized that destroying the transformed ship might eliminate whatever was attracting it. Rostova found herself at a crossroads. Her military training and every instinct of self-preservation told her to follow orders, to destroy this incomprehensible thing and flee. But she had seen enough to question whether that would actually stop the threat, or merely remove their only defense against it. "What happens if we destroy the Odyssey?" she asked Thorne directly. He shook his head, his expression grim. "The Unraveler doesn't want the ship. It wants to erase the knowledge the ship contains. Destroying the Odyssey won't stop it. It will simply remove our only means of resistance. And what resistance can we offer against something that erases matter from existence?" Karlov demanded. "The Loom," Thorne said, gesturing to the polyhedron. "It's not just a repository, it's a tool. The Weavers designed it to create patterns that the Unravelers cannot easily dissolve. With the integrated crew as anchors, it can generate a local reality strong enough to resist unpatterning." "And who operates this Loom?" Rostova asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Thorne met her gaze steadily. "Edo. The Loom needs a conscious mind to direct it, to provide the intention behind the patterns. The crew alone can't do it. They're part of the system now, not independent operators. You're asking me to bet humanity's survival on alien technology we barely understand, operated by a civilian with no combat experience," Rostova summarized, her voice flat. Thorne smiled thinly. "As opposed to betting it on nuclear weapons against an entity that unmakes matter at the quantum level." "Yes, Commander," That's exactly what I'm asking. The void entity, the Unraveler, continued its approach. Confederate probes sent to intercept it simply vanished. A remote mining outpost on one of Jupiter's outer moons reported seeing reality itself seeming to unravel before all communication ceased. Whatever this thing was, conventional weapons and tactics would be useless against it. Rostova made her decision. Against direct orders, she would not destroy the Odyssey. Instead, she would support Thorne's desperate plan, using the Stiletto's conventional weapons systems to provide whatever distraction or disruption they could while he attempted to activate the loom. If this fails, she told him as they prepared, the human race may not survive to court-martial me. If it fails, Thorne replied gravely, there won't be a court left to do the marshalling. As the Unraveler approached, its nature became clearer. It wasn't a ship or even a being in the conventional sense. It was a localized phenomenon of ontological decay, a spreading absence that consumed pattern and structure. It moved with apparent intelligence, adjusting its approach to target the Odyssey specifically. Inside the central chamber, Thorne reconnected with the loom, this time with full intention and awareness. The knowledge of the Weavers flooded through him again, but now he was prepared, directing the flow rather than being overwhelmed by it. He understood, in ways his human mind could barely articulate, how to activate the full potential of the transformed Odyssey. The integrated crew members connected to the ship's systems began to wake, not to consciousness as humans would understand it, but to purpose. Their bodies trembled slightly, the crystalline growths pulsing with increased intensity. The symbols throughout the ship accelerated their flow, all converging toward the central chamber where Thorne communed with the loom. Outside, the Stiletto engaged the Unraveler, though engagement hardly described the one-sided encounter. Conventional weapons passed through the void entity without effect. Rostova, demonstrating the tactical brilliance that had defined her career, instead targeted nearby space debris, creating cascades of matter and energy that momentarily disrupted the Unraveler's approach, buying precious seconds for Thorne's efforts. Within the chamber, the Odyssey began its transformation from vessel to fortress. The crystalline structures throughout the ship extended and reconfigured, growing outward like a blooming flower of light and geometry. Patterns of energy rippled across its hull, no longer subtle but blazingly bright, visible to the naked eye from millions of kilometers away. The Unraveler responded, extending tendrils of unpattern toward the Odyssey, attempting to begin the process of dissolution. Where these tendrils touched the ship's new defenses, reality itself seemed to warp and struggle, neither pattern nor unpatterned fully dominant. Through his connection to the loom, Thorne directed the ship's response, weaving counter-patterns of increasing complexity. It was not a battle in any conventional sense, more a mathematical argument played out in the fabric of reality itself, with the stakes being existence or obliteration. Thorne began to understand, with growing horror and acceptance, what victory would require. The Unraveler could not be destroyed. It was too vast, too fundamental a force. The best they could achieve was stalemate, a local fortress of pattern strong enough to resist dissolution indefinitely. But maintaining such a defense required constant, conscious attention. His mind permanently merged with the loom and the integrated crew. As this realization solidified, he felt a strange peace descend. His entire life had led to this moment. His obsession with Eleanor Way's disappearance, his controversial theories, his professional isolation, all preparing him to become something new, something necessary. Through the ship's systems, he communicated his understanding to Rostova, not in words but in fragmented thoughts and emotions, conveying both the necessity and his acceptance of what must come. There has to be another way, Rostova argued, her voice coming through the ship's communication systems into the central chamber. We can retreat, regroup, find a technological solution. No time, Thorne managed to respond, his voice strained as more of his consciousness merged with the loom. The Unraveler won't stop. Can't stop. It's what it is. Need. Permanent gardien. Rostov understood then. Thorn wasn't just operating the alien technology. He was becoming part of it, joining the integrated crew in a state of existence beyond human life but not quite death. A conscious anchor for the patterns that would hold the Unraveler at bay. "Dr. Thorn," she said formally, using his title one last time, "on behalf of the Solar Confederacy, I accept your sacrifice." Thorn smiled faintly as the crystalline structures began to envelop him, connecting him permanently to the loom and the integrated consciousness of the Odyssey. His last thought as an independent human being was not of fear or regret, but of a strange satisfaction. He had sought understanding his entire life. Now he would become understanding itself. The final merger triggered a blinding pulse of structured light from the Odyssey. The Unraveler's dissolution field was contained, pushed back into a localized distortion well away from Jupiter's orbit, isolated effectively, though not destroyed. A new equilibrium established itself. The Odyssey, glowing with complex energies, eternally weaving patterns of reality that contained and neutralized the void's attempt to unravel existence. Rostova and the stiletto withdrew to a safe distance, watching as the transformed ship stabilized into its new state, neither fully vessel, nor weapon, nor living entity, but something that incorporated aspects of all three. The integrated crew, including Thorn, were now part of this silent, luminous symphony, forever maintaining their vigil against extinction. When a stiletto finally returned to Earth, Rostova brought with her fragments of data and Thorn's research logs. Humanity was safe, for now, but forever changed. They possessed pieces of Weaver knowledge, glimpses into a vaster universe than they had imagined, and the sobering understanding that reality itself could be both weapon and battlefield. The Odyssey remained in Jupiter's orbit, a silent monument to what had been found and what had been lost. Confederacy scientists studied it from a respectful distance, learning what they could without disturbing its essential function. Sometimes, when instruments were calibrated just right, they detected complex patterns of energy that some swore resembled human thoughts. Echoes of Eris Thorn and the original crew, still conscious in some ineffable way, still standing guard. Humanity began the slow process of adapting to a universe more complex and dangerous than they had ever imagined, learning to understand and perhaps someday use the fragmented knowledge of the Weavers. They established a permanent research outpost near Jupiter, studying both the transformed Odyssey and the contained Unraveler distortion, preparing for a future where reality itself was the battleground. And sometimes, in the quiet hours when Jupiter's bulk blocked the sun, observers at the outpost would swear they could hear a faint, complex humming emanating from the glowing ship. Not a distress call or a warning, but something more like a lullaby, sung by what had once been human to what might one day replace humanity altogether.